Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Anthony. How are you on this fine, chilly January Tuesday morning?
I have tried to follow what the advice is going to be on this podcast by meditating this morning, and I'm miserable at it. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Bob today because I have no idea what this whole mamby-pamby.
I don't know these things, Cole.
I
don't
tried
know
that positive thinking crap once, and I knew it wasn't going to work, and I was right.
Anthony, Juliette Gordon Lowe overcame partial hearing loss to launch the Girl Scouts, proving that serene focus can turn personal adversity into lasting impact. It's a testament to how mindful leadership empowers even the most underestimated to spark a movement that changes the world. I'm Chris Franks. He's Anthony Franco. This is How to Founder. Today, Anthony, we have Mr. Bob Martin, who maybe has the greatest backstory of any guest that we've ever had. We'll get into it in a second. He's built a career spanning criminal law, corporate consulting, and mindfulness coaching. At 74, he merges the lessons of Taoist masters, brain science, and raw life experience to help founders and executives cultivate clarity and confidence through mindful leadership. Welcome, Bob. Thank you for joining us. And so first of all, tell the people where you are today.
I am in Playas del Coco, Guanacaste, Costa Rica.
Pretty easy to be mindful and centered in Costa Rica when I'm going to be sitting in traffic for 6 hours today trying to drive 5 miles. Bob, let's just start with the basics here. Why do I, as a founder, what is mindfulness, and why do I need to care about this? Why is this an important fact for me as a founder?
Let me answer that by giving you the answer my teacher, Master Watching Me, told me when I asked him what it is to gain mastery in life. He chuckled, and then he said, "Oh, it's simple. All you need to know is be aware of all of the forces that are working within you, and then be aware of all of the forces that are working with the person that you are with. And then be aware of all of the forces in the environment around you, and then simply remove the barriers so that it all becomes one."
Got that, Anthony? You got it, right? That's it. That's all you have to do right there.
Then he chuckled and walked off. But he was pointing to the idea that we need to become aware of our conditioning and our thoughts and our automatic responses to things, and have some skill in managing them. I guess the bottom line would be this: empathic leadership, empathic management is not an oxymoron. If it comes down from the top that you care for your team is going to want to do the most for you. And that's the secret of creating the bond that's necessary for any business to really succeed.
Why? So I think I get it. Can you help just get a little bit more firm in my mind about what being mindful is first and foremost? And I get the larger pieces there.
I hear this all the time. It's a great question. Like, I'm into mindfulness. I have download a mindfulness app. I'm like, I don't even know what that means.
Well, it's such a big umbrella term now. And so just to start, maybe take a crack at the bigger definition, but particularly just start in that you started talking about mindful leadership. See if we can get to a slightly more concrete definition.
Okay. Well, let me first say mindfulness and meditation is kind of like the old saying that you can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. All meditation is mindfulness, but not all mindfulness is meditation. Mindfulness is simply being aware of what you're doing and having not being caught up in a fog of rumination and projection and have that default committee in your head, blah, 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 but really bring your attention. Let me give you an example. You're driving along and the car is taking you home. You've driven it so many times, it's all muscle memory. Meanwhile, your head is thinking about what you should have said to this guy and what you're going to do and whether you left the stove on and what you're going to have for dinner, right? But then a car gets a little bit too close to you, and all of a sudden, your state of mind shifts immediately, and you are attending. Your attention is on the situation, okay? That is you're in the present moment then. You're not caught in the fog that we're generally in. So when you can do something with that kind of attentiveness, instead of saying attention, I like to use the word attending. When you can attend to what you're doing in an intentional way, that is simply mindfulness. Now, meditation is a way, a structured kind of practice, just like working out at the gym. You go to the gym and you're going to do 15 pounds today and maybe 16 pounds tomorrow. It's a practice. Jogging is a practice. You do it and you do it and you get better at it. So meditation is simply a practice that is not very difficult and doesn't take a long time, and you don't have to sit in a funny position and you don't have to chant anything. It's just a simple practice that you can engage in without any special equipment that helps you become more aware of the state of attending to things versus the state of being caught in the fog. And so mindfulness, so meditation is just that. I would say I'll go on and say, it's not a hippy-dippy, touchy-feely thing of quieting the mind. What it is it is a process of learning how to watch your thoughts without interfering with them and allowing them to flow. Whenever I say I'm a mindfulness teacher, the first thing people say to me is, oh, I tried that. I can't do that. One time I tried to sit down, and the first thing that happened is my mind went crazy, and I'll never be able to quiet my mind, and I just can't do that. That's what people say.
Yeah, and you literally can't do it wrong. Yeah, people go, oh, I can't meditate. I did it wrong. It's like, well, you literally cannot do meditation wrong. If you sit down,
you literally cannot do it wrong.
Right,
so what it is that most of the time when we're caught in this rumination and projection, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, we don't have any skill in managing all those thoughts. They're all just kind of coming up all automatically. But if we sit back a little bit and we start to watch it happening instead of just being in it, we step out of it and watch it. Now, that is not supernatural. There's nothing weird about that. You do it all the time when you think, oh, I shouldn't have said that. That's a little bit of meditation. The scientists call it metacognition, thinking about your thinking. So all we do is do it in a kind of intentional way and a practiced way for a few minutes a day. And all of a sudden you begin to step out of being your thoughts to watching your thoughts. And here's the kicker. From being in your thoughts, you are dealing with the roller coaster of life. Whatever life hands you and however you respond to it, whatever your automatic response is, that's what it is. But if that stream of consciousness is like a river and you're riding on a log in the river, what if at the same time you could step up on the bank of the river and actually watch yourself riding on the log of the river? It's from that place of watching your thoughts, as you become a little bit more skilled at doing it, that the wisdom comes, that the ability to manage your thought, that the skillfulness in thinking, it all comes from the watcher, from that person that's up on the bank watching you.
I think it's I think it's a really good definition. So I'm going to try to summarize in absolute laypersons. The definition of mindfulness then is the ability of us as professionals, as founders, is to direct our mind into individual places, things, tasks, etc. So it is the ability to control one's mind to be able to say, I can focus on these things. Meditation, and there's other tools. There's some people like walking, some people like running. All those things are tools to try to arrive at this concept called mindfulness. And I think it's important, Anthony, for us to say, at this point in time, the scientific benefits of any mindfulness practice, to reduce stress, to reduce blood pressure, to, like, there's a stat right here we have in our notes that 40% of managers stress that says that stress hampers their decision, and that mindful leaders see a 30% reduction in employee turnover. And so there is real tangible benefits for us as founders to somehow start to say, as I'm thinking about learning, I also want to learn about this. Anthony, I just gut take on this, because it's kind of fun, because both Bob and I have a little bit, Bob obviously a much deeper background than I do, but does that make sense to you as far as this concept
I'm sorry,
of what
Chris,
is
I wasn't really
mindfulness?
paying attention.
Hey, I'm sorry, what? I was having an argument with my wife in my head. That's what
does it count if you're thinking about your thinking? Like, does that can
that's
you go
metacognition. Yeah, that's exactly right.
There's so I self-admittedly am a novice at understanding this, right? So, but what I think the underlying power in this conversation is we talk about this all the time, Chris, and that is the first rule of being a founder is you have to know yourself. And if you don't know what motivates you, if you don't know what drives you, effectively, if you don't know what triggers that dopamine, then you're at a severe disadvantage. So what it sounds to me like, what I'm learning here is that there's a mindfulness is the practice of knowing yourself and being able to separate the person from your mind and move back and take a look at yourself from an objective perspective, which is really hard, right?
It is. And I think, Anthony, one of the things that in our world as founders, the thing that shows up most is fear, right? You could be going and you could be executing, and you could be crushing, and maybe nothing even happens, right? But something triggers this response, and suddenly you've seen it, I've seen it, I've gone through it, where suddenly I'm going down the drain and I'm freaked out, and the company's going to go under and we're going to fail. I don't even, sometimes it's nothing logical that triggered me those responses. Bob, have you seen that with executives and founders?
Yeah, well, I certainly have, but the best story I could tell you is actually with one of my college students. So I teach it on campus, and it's a 4-credit course, and of course it's an elective. So people self choose to take the course. So this one young lady is in my class, and the way that I teach is they have an app that was developed at Duke University, and I teach them the technique. They practice on the app with the guided meditation. But what's different is that they log their responses every single practice. Those responses come to my dashboard, and from my dashboard, I can send back to their app the coaching of the day. So they have contact with me every single day. Now imagine if you were learning yoga and your yoga teacher was with you watching a video every single day and say, move that foot a little to the left, raise that elbow a little bit every day, make incredible progress. Anyway, I noticed that she's not engaging. I'm not getting any logs from her. So I asked her to say after class, what's going on? You took the class voluntarily, and I'm sure that you know that you can't just go into a gym and look at the machines. You got to get on them and practice. So, what's happening? Well, it all started, I don't understand, because it seems like, I always know what I want, but I never go do it. Simple procrastination issue. And it seemed like we weren't there yet. So I just kept asking her, well, I'm using meditation tools here, not therapy tools. So I'm saying, what are the exact words that flow through your head? And she starts to tell me what the words are. And that leads her to a deeper understanding. And within 20 minutes, all of a sudden she breaks down into tears and says, I just don't think I deserve to be happy.
Right.
Wow. So again, I'm a meditation teacher. I mean, I am a therapist, but I'm not there as a therapist. So I'm going to use meditation tools. So I start asking her questions like, what are the exact words that, are flowing through your head? What comes after that? But then most importantly, where are you feeling this in your body? Where is the physical sensation that you're getting that is upsetting to you? So she said, oh, it's everywhere. It's in my eyes. And, just staying with her and asking. Finally, she identified it's a spot underneath my collarbone and it feels like it's throbbing, but it's not really throbbing. Okay. By the time we got there, it was an academic exercise where she was pulling apart the component parts of her emotion. And she was finding that as component parts, she could easily manage them. So by the time we were done, she knew that all of this emotion and all of this stuff was nothing more than a passing thought and a physical sensation that she had in her body. That's all it was. It wasn't any big boogeyman. And by the time of the end of the class, she was engaging every single day. And she's going to take that out into her life, and it's going to change her life. And I got to tell you, it makes my heart flutter when I see that happen.
Anthony, what Bob was just talking about has real world consequences with founders. And I think this is why it's such a critically important conversation, is because you said it best when you said you got to know yourself. Mindfulness is a tool to kind of go do this. One of the biggest problems is we've seen companies go entirely off the rails because the founder's stress response or fear response or something where or ego response, right? Do you have any examples, like maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else, where you started to chase boogeymen, like Bob was saying, when the reality was you just needed to continue to execute? I mean, I can think of 4 or 5 responses in my own foundership.
Yeah, I mean, so emotionally being a founder is a roller coaster. And I can't, Chris, I'd love to hear if you have an example top of mind. I have a couple that aren't really good, but you probably have some better. So
wait, can I jump in there?
Yeah, please, Bob.
I want to address what you said. It's an emotional roller coaster. Okay. And I want to go back to that example that I gave you about sitting up on the bank and unpack that a little bit. Okay. So let's say that, and I think that we all can acknowledge that we sense and feel that there's a stream of consciousness that goes through our mind. It's like a stream of thinking that goes through our mind. And on that stream, there are individual thoughts. And I'm going to use the metaphor of a river. The river is going downstream. That's our stream of consciousness. And on it, there are twigs and leaves and everything. And it's like we're riding on the leaf. And if the water is calm, things are going well. But then there's such a thing as whitewater. Then there's such a thing as waterfalls. Then there's such a thing as floods that sweep your home away. I mean, all of these metaphors are part of the roller coaster that founding is about. Now, from the place of riding the log, you got no control. You got to ride it. There's no choice. But if you can step out of that and get up on the bank in your metacognition and watch it happening, there are 2 things that are going on. One, you're experiencing the roller coaster. But from the place of the observer, from the place of watching it, there is a stability and there is a calmness and there is a objective evaluation, so that from that place, you have stability, and it's from that place that you get the strength. Now, how do you get the skill of doing that? Very simple process.
I want to get into how. But I'm gonna put a contrarian point of view out here.
Sure.
Go, let's do it, because I'm gonna.
So
let's go, Anthony.
Being a successful entrepreneur requires a broken human being. We need to be delusional and I don't know another. So fixing and being able to be calm in a storm and being able to be objective instead of being on the log, couldn't that break your ability to be a good entrepreneur? I mean,
it's a terrific
once you're
question.
Healthy, you shouldn't want to do this anymore.
Well,
right?
So you are out in the ocean and you want to get to shore. Okay? That's your goal. That's your success. Getting to shore is your success. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You can say, damn, the torpedo's full speed ahead and swim like hell and panic and drown. Or you can just put out a consistent energy swimming towards shore, and I'm just going to keep going and going. And you will get to shore, but you're going to be exhausted.
Yes.
The other option is to be aware of the tide. And when the tide is going with you, swim like hell. But when the tide is going against you, conserve your energy and just stay put and wait for the tide to change so that you can move forward. That means that you put out less effort, you become more effective and more efficient. So what that means is we have to be not only aware of ourselves, but we also have to be aware of the dynamic that's happening around us and be able to align ourselves with the present situation. If somebody's not listening to you, you need to be quiet. But use the time to think about refining your statement so that when they are ready to listen to you, you can speak into their listening.
I love the analogy, except for what idiot jumps in the ocean again?
We do, right? Apparently. Right? We just do it again and again and again.
Once you go through that effort of getting to shore, we jump back in. Like, what's wrong with us, right?
Well, so Anthony, this is the reason why I want to frame this up as this, and I'm going to probably go right back to you with this next question, which is, you and I talk all the time, and we say you need to look objectively at what's going on in your business and look for the facts and the trends. And you need to be able to sit back and understand whether pivot or persevere and look at one of those components, right? We say, and we always say, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to go do this. To this point, we've said nothing about the tools that you need to develop as a founder to be able to sit back and look objectively in those moments. We said, hey, you need to surround yourself with other people that can help you and guide you, be your peers and your mentors along the way. But truly, this technique that we're talking about, why it's so critical for founders, is the tool that you need to develop to, when something is going bad, to remove yourself from the actual emotional drama and look at objectively, is this a market problem? Is it a product problem? Is it a customer problem? Is it an employee problem? Is it a me problem? Exactly. Yeah. And so the importance here, and I think, Bob, this is what you're getting to, is this is the tool to be able to look at the world objectively that successful founders have to develop. I think they have to. Do you agree with that, Bob?
I would just say it is a tool. It's not the only tool. There are many tools, reading, learning, ingesting, contemplating, practicing Tai Chi is, meaning knowing that, things sometimes go well for you and sometimes they don't go so well, and learning how to adjust yourself to the ebb and flow of the business that you're in. I mean, these are all tools that you can use. But yes, this is probably the most direct tool to get you there.
All right. So I'm going to just recap to where we've gotten to this point.
And by the way, my comment was half tongue-in-cheek, half serious, right? So I do see the value in mindfulness and practicing it. So Chris, wrap it up. Summarize it for where we are now. Now I want to learn how. How do I?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to get to. Cool. So we've understand what is mindfulness is the ability for us to point our focus and mind on any given task, any given issue, witness what's going on in our heads. We've discussed the fact that why it's so critically important is that we oftentimes as founders, I love the analogy of a river, but I'll use the storm analogy. we're often in the storm. And it's so hard to get above the clouds to actually see what's going on. And so it's a really critical skill for us to develop as founders. So we now know it's important. We now know what it is. Let's talk about the techniques. And you've already mentioned some. And I think that this is where that concept of mindfulness gets thrown in with a lot of more contemplative practices like Buddhism, Taoism, Tai Chi, and all those others. But what are some very practical steps that a founder or a layperson could start to do to develop that pause, that moment of removal, of noticing?
Okay. So let me distinguish meditation from relaxation, because a lot of people get apps and they're mostly relaxation apps. And relaxation is vital because when you're stressed, your mind narrows and constricts to trying to solve a particular problem and it doesn't even know what the problem is. When you relax, your mind broadens and builds. You actually see the world through greater peripheral vision. You literally see the world more broadly, and that's when the creative ideas and solutions come. So relaxation is vital, but it's not meditation. Okay, so how? Do you know how sometimes you're listening to somebody? I'm sure you guys do it with each other all the time. You're listening to one another, and then all of a sudden you realize you're not listening.
What? Huh?
What?
Huh?
What?
Never happens to me.
Never.
Never happens.
Right. And do you notice that when you notice that you're not listening, it's a tiny little sensation of startle. It's like, oh, I'm not listening. There's like an oh there, like I wake up. Well, that's the moment of mindfulness. That's the moment when your mind is telling you that you have gone off into the fog. Your mind has wandered off. And so what you'll do is then a flood of judgments will come. Oh, I should have been listening to the guy. I missed it. Now I'm not going to know what he's going to blah, 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 blah. But finally, they'll quiet down. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go back to start listening again. That is the mindfulness procedure, except we set it up artificially so that you can practice it over and over and over. So you simply say, I'm going to pay attention to my breath. And you notice the physical sensation, the rising and falling of your chest, and then your mind goes nuts and you start thinking about 100 different things. But because you set the intention to pay attention to your breath, at some point your mind will say, oh, you're not paying attention to your breath. And then there'll be a flood of judgments, and then the judgments will quiet down, and then you go back and you begin again. And then your mind goes off again, and you notice it, and there's a flood of judgments. And so if you do this same process over and over, it stops becoming something new, and it starts becoming something that you are aware of. So now you're not just having the judgments, you're noticing your judgments. And that is the beginning of starting to notice your thinking. So if you just simply make this simple practice, mind wanders, you wake up, you have judgments, you return, you begin again. Wander, notice, return, begin again. The healing is in the learning, is in the returning and beginning again. And if you just do this for a few minutes a day, over 4 or 5 days, all of a sudden you'll get it and you'll say, oh, now I see what it means to be up on the bank, like my students do after the second week. They go, oh, I finally get what you've been trying to tell us. And you actually have the physical sensation of being on the bank and watching yourself. And it's so simple. The hardest thing is to remember to do it. But it's such a simple practice. And the benefits of it are so amazing that you just wonder why everybody in the world wouldn't do this. It doesn't cost anything. You don't need any equipment. It takes 10 minutes. You can do it at home. And it has these incredible benefits. But that's basically the practice. You simply learn. And what you're doing there is you're becoming familiar with the fog, what it's like to be in default mode. And you're getting familiar what it's like to be in the state of attention. And as you start reconnecting with the bodily sensations that are involved, with the mental attitude, with the state of mind, they all become things that you can use. You know, I remember Bruce Lee once said, "The man who has practiced 1,000 kicks does not make me afraid. The man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times, he I fear."
It's
So
you
it's
bring up
like that. You practice it over and over, and it becomes yours. And then all of a sudden, when you're out in a management situation and you're confronted with something that usually would get inside you and you'd have a reaction to, bam, immediately you see your reaction, you catch it in real time, and you have the ability to interfere and change your position and change your direction. And you begin to actually create. Now, there's a whole bunch of brain science that goes along with this in terms of neuroplasticity and the creation of neural pathways and the like. And, you know, that's a whole other podcast that we could talk about, the right and left prefrontal cortex and your executive functions.
Well, I think you mentioned two things, and I won't get super neuroscience-y on you, Anthony, but there is this idea, and it's kind of losing a little bit of credibility now in modern neuroscience, is the amygdala takeover. And that's when you're in panic mode and you're scared and you're in fight or flight mode. That happens as a founder daily, probably more so than any other career you're going to have. You're pushed into this world of panic because you're the person that's responsible. You are the person that's in charge. And so I think that one of the two things that Bob really mentioned, I think is really critical for just foundational stuff is, number one, understanding when you're in that panic mode. And then number two, how do you get out of it and start to actually deconstruct what's happening there? And I think, again, Bob, I'll come back to you in just a second.
Here's one thing I do, Chris. Just here's one thing I do. Maybe this is mindfulness, right? So I'd love to hear your thought on this, Bob. So something really bad happens. Company has to file bankruptcy. You have to fire somebody. You lose a client. You know, something really bad happens. I basically tell myself I give myself 24 hours to feel this deeply, to sulk in it, to be a baby about it, right? I give myself 24 hours, but tomorrow I'm back. You got to get back at it. So I've been able to time box the amygdala. I can't say it. Am I on the right track there, or is
Yes, you are. Yes,
okay.
you are. Yes, you are. Although I would say that if you practice these techniques, you would cut that 24 hours down to 24 minutes.
No, but I like doing it because it gives me permission to eat ice cream. So I give myself.
But the other thing, just knowing each other as well as we do, Anthony, you go take a walk. Like when you need a moment, you go take a walk.
I'll get away from the thing that I'm doing and go do something else that involves my hands or something physical. Yeah, I will do that. Absolutely.
And I would argue that's the very foundation of mindfulness. You're just saying, whoa, I'm not being as productive here in this moment. Maybe not even sure why, but I'm getting frustrated. I'm just going to stop, take a deep breath, and walk away. All right. So
that's
Bob,
what I'm talking about, aligning yourself with the dynamic of the time. This is not a time that I can make progress. You just accept it and you back away. This is a time for me to relax. This is a time for me to retreat and prepare for when I can move forward again. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Bob, let's just talk about the practical steps. So I think we've gotten to the point. We know what it is. We know why it's important. We know now how critical it is for us as founders to start to develop this ability to step back, get your hub, see the forest for the trees for the forest or whatever. But yet, Anthony, you've got a brilliant insight.
There's something that Bob said that I think we need to underscore here. And you just identified something that I struggle with deeply, and I think a lot of founders do, that I don't want to gloss over. This is a time I cannot make progress. As a founder, if you're not moving, we're sharks. If you're not moving, you're not breathing.
Right.
And
very, very hard life. Not necessary.
Yeah, but also if I'm not making progress, it, there's this discontent in my heart, and I feel like I should be doing something. So I actually judge myself when I'm not making progress. And I've recently learned to like take a step back and go, wait a minute, I'm not going to be able to make progress for the next couple of weeks. I just need to get comfortable in the quiet. And it's very hard to do. But I think that I wish I would have learned that much earlier, that you shouldn't just jump onto something and try to make progress when you know you're not going to be able to.
Right.
That you can give yourself some space to not make progress. I
Right.
don't know why, but I think a lot of founders need to hear that. Sorry, Chris,
I
didn't mean
think
to interrupt.
no,
You know,
it's
that's like-
important. So, Bob,
Yeah.
just talk briefly about frenetic energy. This concept that we have, and it's like this nervous frenetic energy where if we're not moving, we feel like we're not making progress. And if we're not making progress, then fear comes in, which can be, Anthony, as you know this well, frenetic energy can be completely destructive within a company, like focused attention,
I'm going to
discipline.
know exactly
execution.
what you're talking about when I look up frenetic. So I can't wait to get to a dictionary.
So give us a brief reaction on that, Bob, and then let's move on to the speed round.
So it's just simply not real. It's not authentic. It's like this. You're in a room, you want to leave the room, and there's a door over to your right, but you insist on going through the wall. It's going to be very difficult. There's a door to the right. That's the truth. But I want to go this way, and I want to go that way. And there's a wall there. And the fact of the matter is that there's a wall there. So the idea, first of all, the judgments is a huge piece of it. Okay, the inner committee that's telling you shoulda, woulda, oughta, you gotta, you oughta, you gotta. And that's really the source of like all of the frenetic energy, because you got this voice in your head that's telling you that you have to do something. And that those are judgments. So remember I said in my example of the techniques, your mind goes away on a wander, you wake up, and then there's a flood of judgments. One of the benefits that you begin to develop is that you start to notice the judgments and you allow the judgments, and rather than trying to stop it, because you can't stop your thinking, you can only allow it. And it's like a little bratty kid that's in your head and it wants to bother you. And if you try to stop it, you just energize it. And if you allow it, it kind of goes, oh, this is really boring. I'm not bothering him anymore. And it just goes away. It's totally counterintuitive. Totally counterintuitive. It's like when you can't sleep at night because you have racing thoughts. Everybody tries to stop thinking. Yeah, how's that working for you? So the thing is say, oh, if I want to think about, what I'm going to cook tomorrow, well, okay, let me think about that. Give it the attention, and then it'll switch to something else. Give it the attention. Allow it. Don't allow it to be. Finally, it just gets bored and you fall asleep. It's like there's a part of your brain that just wants to bug you. And just like a parent, you got a kid who's acting bratty. You say, I don't want to play with you. I'm going to go in the other room. And then the kid comes and says, hey, would you do this with me, please?
It's
the same thing.
One of my favorite points here is that voice is not your friend. Like that voice is not your friend.
It's the conditioning.
Right.
That voice is actually your dad or your grandfather or some teacher or somebody that planted themselves in your head and is still talking to you.
Did I say that out loud? I didn't mean to say that out loud.
So, Bob, this is it's such a fascinating conversation. It's something I'm deeply passionate about. So I know we could go on for, a ton of time, but I want to give you one opportunity here, and then we'll move into the speed round. What are some very practical things that I can do today as a founder to start to try to get out of the river, to get over to the bank? What are just some first steps? I know that there's all kinds of practices and books I can go do, but what are some first steps?
All right. Okay. If you can do this, it will put you on the path. If you can allow yourself to believe, even if you have to fake it till you make it, okay, that I am not my thoughts. I am the creator of my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. If you can buy into that, then you are starting to break up some of the conditioning that's controlling you. It may take a little while for that to sink in. If you can just kind of repeat, I'm not my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. I'm the creator of my thoughts. When I say I had a thought, who is the I that's having the thought? That's who you are. That's who your internal intuitive intelligence is. But it's covered up by all the freaking, I was going to say, you know what I was going to
Good
say.
job. We've been trying to not cuss lately, Bob.
We've been
So
trying
it's
to
good.
not cuss.
It's been covered up by all the effing conditioning that's on top of you. And if you can just buy into this idea that I'm not my thoughts, I can't buy them, I can't sell them, I can't market them, I can't hold them in my hands. They're just pulses of energy going through my mind. They ain't shit. Okay? Yeah. If you can buy into that, it will set you into a curiosity to want to know more about how to skillfully manage them.
I love the fact that I wasn't the first person to cuss in this podcast, Anthony. It was Bob this time. It was not me. All right. One more question, and then let's go into the speed round. Right. Briefly, what are some resources?
That's the third time you said it.
What are some? So I think that's a really good place to start. But let's say that I do want to take the next step. I just want to start to work on some sort of base meditation practice. I started with Headspace app. I started on YouTube,
relaxation
Spotify.
App.
Yeah. I mean, just some basic places where you can learn some really basic techniques. Do you have any that you recommend?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So people ask me that question all the time, and I want to make everything that's available to them. So go to my website, and there are two 40-page ebooks that you can download for free. One of them says, is meditation for me, what it is, what it's not, you know, how to start it and where to go. And it's a little 40-page primer, and it'll tell you what the techniques are, and it'll give you resources and recommend some apps and all that. The other one is 25 tips to relax that you can learn in 5 minutes. And that you can download. You can download that and you get it. I've got 56 gigabytes of resources on my website if you go to the resources page. And so I would say that anything and everything that you could possibly want, you can find there. No obligation, no expense, and anything else. And if you want to take a class, evidence-based, developed at Duke University teaching methodology, you know, I'm happy to talk to you about it. But it's a wiseandhappylife.com. And it is designed exactly to answer the question you just asked me. Where do I start?
That's perfect. I would just add, Anthony, is that when I first started, I started trying to meditate in college. And the only thing I knew is you had to sit down and focus on your breath. And it was so hard.
Yeah.
Early on, guided meditation is so much easier. Just having somebody talk to you through it and bringing you back when your mind, as one of the guided meditations I used to listen to is like, if you have a mind, it will wander. So it's going to happen. All right, let's do the speed round.
Let me just say, could you imagine if you had those apps back in college, but along with the app, you had not only the app, but you had a live human practice teacher who you connected with by texts every single day after every single practice? How quick would you have?
I think it's profoundly important because like I tried to practice by myself for years.
Yeah.
The moment that I started working within a meditation community, things went so much faster. It was just having
nothing like a coach.
It's like trying to learn MBA class skills by yourself. You can do it. It's gonna take you.
You can do it.
Versus just going to
kind of describes my sex life. I used to do it by myself, and it's a lot more fun with somebody else.
Well, you know, that reminds me. I tell my students that meditation is kind of like sex. You know, people will start out, they'll try all these different techniques, but then they'll settle in on a few favorites.
Oh, that's well played. All right, speed round, Bob. Are you ready?
Yep.
Hustle versus harmony as a founder. What do I need? How do I balance that?
Curate your environment. You have a responsibility to feel beauty and awe.
Performance versus presence. Do I need to be more focused on the performance of my company or me personally being mindful and present?
Present. Take care of what's on the plate in front of you. The future will take care of itself.
Should I go in short sprints or try to stay steady, long-term focused energy?
Both, depending on the situation.
Should I really focus on mental training or really just trust my natural instinct?
Is there a difference?
Good answer. Immediate goals versus long-term goals. Do I focus more on the daily task list, or do I need to focus more on the long term?
Strategy cannot work without tactics. Tactics can't work without strategy. You have to have both. You have to have your long-term strategy and then figure out what steps you need to get there. Start with the end in mind.
Some really good resources available for us, Anthony. Oh, so sorry. Anthony, what did you learn? Tell us about what you're taking away from this episode.
I wrote a bunch of stuff down. I'll try to keep it as short as I can. So the first takeaway that I grabbed out of this podcast was, if you pretend to care about people, you can get them to do what you want. Right?
I think you missed the point, Anthony. I think that was not quite what we were trying to say.
So for real, mindfulness, point your focus and become aware of your thinking. Mindfulness is a tool to help you look at yourself objectively. I love that framing of it. The critical piece here that Bob said: allow yourself to believe you are not your thoughts, that you're the creator of your thoughts. And the way to kind of do that is, first of all, you kind of do this. I look at it as in steps. First, you're going to just pay attention to your breath, and you're going to forget to do it, and then you're going to remember to do it. And so you're going to pay attention to your breath and repeat. Then you're going to pay attention to your judgments and repeat. And then you're eventually going to notice your thinking and repeat that.
I think that was well said. Deep dive recommendations. I'm actually going to go off script here. The book that is my favorite book and that I recommend all the time, Bob, is Tara Brach's. It's True Refuge, but her first one, I just can't even remember it now that I say it. The Sacred Pause book. I'll get it in 1 second. But it basically anything by Tara Brach and her podcast. I don't know if you've listened to any of that stuff, Bob.
Great. RAIN.
RAIN. That's that sacred pause.
RAIN,
So Tara Brach has Radical Acceptance.
Radical Acceptance is the book that I recommend the most, as I can't even remember the name of the book. But yeah, Radical Acceptance is truly one of my favorite books, and it's the book that I probably recommend the most. There's a really good podcast, or there's a great article, Anthony.
Don't do it.
Harvard Business Review.
That's the $1 million thing. That's not Harvard Business. Like, you're mixing your metaphors.
I don't know. Yeah, but I'm bald, so I can kind of be Dr. Evil. It'd be great. It's called Why Mindfulness Matters in Leadership by Harvard Business Review, Daniel Goleman. Mm-hmm. And The Effective Executive, I actually really like this because it does, even well before, this is the classic book by Peter Drucker, the first book truly on executive leadership. And he does cover a lot of these really interesting points of how you should try to manage yourself and your time. So that is it, Bob. Really good conversation. You've already mentioned some of it, but tell me where we can find out more about you. Tell me how we can connect. Tell me how we can find more of these resources you were talking about.
wiseandhappylife.com.
A wise and happy life.
And
I love that.
I put that link in the comments, both on YouTube and on our LinkedIn stream. So I put all your links there. I hope that's okay, Bob. But
that's fine.
Your links are commented there.
Bob,
thank you so much for this. Was a great conversation. I really learned a ton. Thank you everybody for listening. Again, I'm Anthony Franco, my cantankerous host, Chris Franks. We really appreciate you joining us, as well as Bob. Thank you so much for coming in. Next time we're going to talk about we're going to get back into the practical, like real world. How do you do something? And that's creating positioning that is irresistible. Remember to visit us on howtofounder.com, where you can follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the rest. And I'll sign off by saying, may your venture grow faster than Chris's hair. Thank you, everybody.